In this presentation, I'll go through the semester project. So the idea behind the semester project is to allow you, the student, to understand how to apply exercise physiology concepts to understand endurance performance. All right, so that's the idea. I've got a lot of lecture material for the course, and I present that information to you. But what I'm really hoping is in this semester project that you can take the information that I'm providing to you and then apply it to a question or an area that you really have an interest in. I find that when you do that approach and you find something that's interesting to you, you start applying the material that we're going over to unique situations, that's when you really learn the information a lot better than if we're just trying to learn the material to take an exam or what have you. So really the idea behind this class is to generate real information that people want and they want to have in order to do endurance events. And mostly what I'm focusing on is iron distance events, swim 2.4 miles, bike 112 miles, and then run a marathon. Now, other endurance events are very much more just as interesting. Half marathons, ultra marathons, maybe a 10K swim. Very few of you are looking to do that, but that is a neat open water swim event. Doing some bike rides that are century bike rides. These are all good, all right? And ultimately, when you do your semester project, you're going to want to zero in on some endurance event or category of endurance events. All right, so what are you going to do? Well, at the end of the semester, you will submit a link to a YouTube presentation that you put together. And it provides information regarding a specific question that you're trying to answer. The presentation is only going to be 3 minutes. On one hand, you're like, oh, that's good, 3 minutes, that's not bad. On the other hand, what you'll find is that it's often hard to take a lot of information that you're finding and then whittle it down to key parts that you want to put in to stay within the 3-minute window for a presentation. And that's part of the learning process, because what you do is you gather a lot of information when you start trying to answer some of these questions. And then you start trying to whittle that information down or combine pieces of information to some discernible message. And that's learning. And that when we start doing that, we start looking at different pieces of information from unique perspectives, and then we start to understand that information a little better. And that's the goal here. All right, so what are you going to turn in? Well, the focus of the presentation is to explain to a general audience, which is another important part of this, how key physiological terms and or concepts can be used to answer whatever question you're going to select. So the key is this is general audience that you're presenting to. So people out in the real world who are training for endurance events, you're speaking to them. You're not speaking to your classmates. You're not speaking to your peers. You're not speaking to people who know kinesiology. The reason why that's important is because I find it another way to learn material at a deeper level is to put things in words that people outside our area understand. And so that's a challenge, but yet that's going to be the challenge that you'll be faced with, is trying to explain things in lay terminology, but also being highly accurate in your explanations of information. Okay, so what do we got? Well, you're going to do a 3-minute video, and the idea is that this is an audience for someone who is training for an endurance event. So if you go to Las Vegas Triathlon Club Facebook page, you'll see similar types of questions that what you'll see that I've have ready for you to select from. Or you'll see the level of information that they share with each other to be able to train for an endurance event. The video will incorporate an answer based upon empirical evidence, okay? And this is going to be an important part of the answer, is that you're going to rely on peer-reviewed, scientifically designed projects and manuscripts that ultimately you're going to be using. So we'll also talk about the importance of anecdotal information, which are stories or what works for me. I can tell you what, how I'm able to be successful in an event, but that's an anecdote. What we're going to be interested in is diving into the empirical evidence that's available to try to answer some questions. So what kind of fuel to use, what pacing strategy to use, what stride frequency to use and why, or how to monitor training stress or training load. There's good empirical evidence on a lot of these questions. All right, and you're going to ultimately provide a good take-home point or points as an answer. You're going to emphasize two peer-reviewed papers, and we'll go through this in a little bit more, but this is your empirical evidence, okay? So you're going to emphasize some evidence in your presentation. And you're also going to identify and highlight two physiological concepts or terms that are related to the question. And what I want you to do is actually pick these terms from the terminology worksheet. And if you see a term that is not on the worksheet, just email me and I'll let you know if that term will work, okay? But I want us to use the course content that we're covering as those key concepts and terms. And I'll have semester project assignments to help work through that. And here they are, semester project assignments. You'll be doing 3, maybe 4 assignments specific to building the content for the semester project. So we're not going to wait until the end of the semester, which is only 5 weeks here, to build the project. You're going to start building it from week 1 of the semester. And I will have some days, and I'll post these days and times as to when I'll be available just for a group to everyone log on, or whoever wants to log on to discuss the projects or anything related to the course, because this is all going to be a remote delivery. All right, why are we doing this? Well, distinguish between anecdotes, stories, and empirical, scientific method information. Be able to identify primary sources of information published in peer-reviewed journals, and primary sources versus secondary sources. So we're going to be using sources that are describing the results of an experiment that was conducted. A secondary source is a lit review, where it's combining a lot of information from a variety of papers, which is great. And if you come across one, that's fantastic, but that's not one of the papers that you can emphasize for the presentation. Why are we doing this? Well, I want you to apply exercise physiology terms, concepts to understand something that hopefully you have an interest in. And I think by doing that, we'll learn the material at a deeper level. And then you want to be able to communicate what you've learned and what you know about an answer to a question to a general audience. And I also want to try and encourage innovation. So I'm going to be talking about this a little bit along the way in terms of just looking at things from a unique perspective. Criteria for success: complete all the weekly assignments. That's one graded element of your total grade. Produce a video that provides an answer to a question that's based upon empirical evidence, emphasizes physiological terms, and focused on endurance performance. All right, so the next step, and it'll be a different presentation, is to pick a topic that you find interesting. And believe me, if you find something that's interesting, that's your first big step to being successful. So I've got these questions. I've got a separate video on the questions, and I'll go through that in more detail. Okay, but that's a big picture perspective of the semester project. All right, thanks everyone.